but the need for a currency when the banks start collapsing is going to be just off the charts.
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here for Arcadia Economics, and today I'm quite excited to bring back on a special guest, Bix Weir of Road to Roota, who knows a darn lot about not just the cryptos, precious metals, banking, economy, but the politics and a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes, which certainly I have a couple questions about the Trump administration that love to hear what you think. So Bix, great to have you on here today. How's everything going?
It's all good, Chris. It is crazy. It's crazy out there following the markets, following what's going on with government, following what's going on with, we might go to war next week, if you listen to the news. So absolute lunacy has broken out on planet Earth, and we get to live through it. Lucky us.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Although when I hear these headlines of Iran and Straits of Hormuz, reminds me almost of the Syria and the chemical weapons, where we hear the same story repeated over and over. The evidence never produced, and the track record is what it is. Although, I guess, where do you see this standing with the Trump administration? We've heard stock market's a big fat bubble during the campaign, audit the Fed, gold standard.
All the right things.
We've heard rumors of these things happening. I know that you and a lot of the folks that you talk to believe that there's a lot different going on behind the scenes than what we hear publicly, which I was more inclined to believe as time goes by. It becomes harder now. He wants rate cuts. So what is actually going on, and which Trump do we believe?
I wouldn't believe any Trump or anything anybody in government says, because they're not going to tell you the truth if they don't want you to know the truth. The truth about the economy has been, we've been under a controlled economy probably since, the creation of the Fed. So it's one of those things. That's, the big secret that, all the little secrets have to be maintained to keep the big secret. The big secret being the economic system is not a free market system and hasn't been for over 100 years. And with the invention of computers, it's so easy to rig the markets. So it's kind of like, what should we believe out of Trump? I don't know. Do I think he's working with the good guys to take down the bad guys? Absolutely. Do I think that they're trying to control the situation economically so that the smooth transition, as they call it? Well, absolutely. That's why he hired Steve Mnuchin, the IT guy from Goldman Sachs, to run the Treasury. So I don't believe anything anybody says anymore. But I do think that if you do enough research and you find the clues, you can see some things going on behind the scenes that are very good for us.
Yeah, and certainly, again, interesting with the latest commentary, once 1% rate cut. And I wouldn't go as far as to say this is the case, but it has struck me that with the way you say trade war, tensions ease, market goes up, trade war fears, market goes down, certainly does allow for the possibility of a lot of manipulation. I've wondered could he be tanking the market so that everyone says, well, look, here's the Fed, come to the rescue. We need these rate cuts, especially if he did it now, and then you have the rate cuts and more QE, you still have a year left to go. What do you think's really going on with that?
Yeah. 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 I mean, the playbook is they pull the strings. It's almost identical to the Wizard of Oz. When they pulled the curtain and there's the wizard pulling all the levers. That's what they do with the economy and their computers. They're gonna drive the price of stocks down so that they can justify a rate cut. None of it matters. It's all baloney. And the whole, they can put rates to 0 or negative 100 and still have the price of gold hanging around $1,300. That's a click of a mouse. So. Yep. Same with the U.S. dollar, same with oil, but they do it to kind of convince the market that things are functioning normally. that, there's not going to be a crash because we're going to do this because we're leaning too far this way. And it's all about the Fed and the Treasury lying to us that everything's just fine. The ship's not sinking. We move a little to the left, a little to the right. We're going to end up at the right destination. But it's all computers and derivatives. Every single thing. They could hike the rates to 20% and have gold just sit there. They can put you can do anything you want, but there is an optic part of it also. So they're going to say, well, because the stock market is going down, because we pressed a button, but because the stock market is going down, we're going to cut rates to get the economy jiggered up again. And it's all a lie, 100% a lie. Every single move on every market. It's sad.
And it's amazing how they get the CNBC and everyone riled up. Oh, the Fed and the president, it's not respecting the independence. They're all doing the same thing anyway. So
they're part of it. The media is absolutely 100% part of the operation, along with the banks, the larger banks, the prime dealers of the U.S. Treasury and the Fed, and they all work together in coordination with the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the President's Working Group on Financial Markets, which is the head of the Treasury, the head of the CFTC, the head of the Fed, and the head of the SEC. That's the four people who decide which button to press on the computer to decide where rates go, where the price of oil goes, where the price of the dollar, the pound, the yuan, the peso, you name it. It's all a click of a mouse on a computer.
And then God only knows what's really going on in the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and then makes you wonder what else is out there that we haven't even heard of. That's
I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah, although speaking of the banks, as you've been kind enough to keep me posted on your own Road to Roota YouTube channel lately, Deutsche Bank continues to sink. Geez, I remember it was even back when I was on the trading floor, it must have been 2011, hearing rumors of Deutsche Bank being a trade or two away. Here we are years later. You were pointing out how the chart looks incredibly similar to Lehman Brothers.
It's identical.
How close do you think, and how much more can it go before something happens?
Well, let me put it this way. I remember the first time I predicted a price and when the stock market would crash and things like that. It was February of 2007. Mm-hmm. And it was after I discovered all this stuff out of the Fed. Hey, look, the Fed's trying to destroy the dollar. They're going to crash the system. Everybody said I was a lunatic. Yeah, a year and a half later, it took a year and a half from the time I said for the market to get to that point on September 11th, 2008, which is that moment that Senator Ken Jaworski said we were a half an hour away from everything melting down. I think we're coming to that event again this fall. So I'm thinking the September, October timeframe, but I'm not going to say, oh, this is what I know, this is the date. But everything looks that way based on, you notice they aren't bailing out Deutsche Bank. They could bail out Deutsche Bank easily. The EU could bail them out, or Germany could bail them out and just hide the 45 trillion in derivatives under the covers like they have been. China kind of bailed them out in 2012, but they're not doing it. And as a matter of fact, they're putting a lot of pressure on Deutsche Bank through the Trump transactions. And it's really interesting because one of the main guys at Bankers Trust, when Deutsche Bank took over Bankers Trust back in I think it was 99, the main guy facilitating that merger was Jerome Powell, the current head of the Fed. And so he placed the derivative bomb at Deutsche Bank, and now he's head of the Fed, so that he can either set it off or cover or like fall on the derivative bomb and have the Fed implode. But it's really interesting that the big derivative bomb at Deutsche Bank was all caused by Jerome Powell and the merger of Bankers Trust in the 90s.
Yeah. Are you ever surprised with the way it seems like so many of these things are planned in advance? You would think there's some collection of people that probably do know the dates that some of these things are going down. And, I find it interesting. Things leak out of the White House. A sports team can't keep their trade rumors without leaking. Have you been surprised that as much as guys like you and I are researching and trying to figure out that, still the timing does seem to remain pretty unknown to anyone in the public that I've come across.
In the public, yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I look back at when I first said, hey, they're going to crash the system, when I found the Fed comic book stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I look what Roota wrote in the sand, and she wrote 11+9, which is 9/11. I thought that related to the terrorist attacks on 9/11. In actuality, it related to the exact day that they took down the system in 2008. So a year and a half later, after they published that comic book in January of 2007, and she wrote, the only thing changed in that comic book is what Roota wrote in the sand. In the first comic book, she wrote an economic formula called On the Road to the Golden Age, which said if you want to go back to a gold standard, you print as much money as possible. That's what she wrote in the sand. The second time was 9/11. And then you have 9/11/2008, when the system, literally, that was the day to crash the system. And then we decided to bail out the banks. And then everything changed. And then Satoshi's white paper comes out 2 months later. So yeah, there are people who have specific dates. I've been scouring the latest Fed comic books because they put out 3 new comic books. I happen to be in one of them. I'm very proud of that. They call me Glix, Glix, instead of Big. But I'm scouring the comic books because I know somewhere in there's a clue as to what day they're going to pull the trigger this time. I think it might be September 11th again this year. So we'll keep an eye on September 11th.
Yeah, certainly there have. I remember hearing you mention that a while ago, and did look back at the metals pricing in some of the recent Septembers. Of course, when gold was trading above 1900, U.S. had just been downgraded. The Swiss announced their pegging to the euro, and it got torched in the middle of the night. I think it was September 7th or 8th. So certainly we'll be...
Keep an eye, baby. Keep an eye out.
We'll see. And certainly, as you're well aware, the cryptos have been rallying. Although perhaps more specifically, Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of the major ones, a lot of the altcoins still near their lows. What do you think's changing? Is it just a matter of they're done manipulating them and letting it free, or what do you think's really going on that's caused the recent change?
Well, they're not done manipulating them. They'll never be done manipulating them.
Right.
I mean, it's my contention that people within the Fed actually created Bitcoin, and that's who Satoshi is. And they control it to this day. The idea behind the transition, it used to be to a gold standard, and now it's going to be to a crypto standard, is for a smooth landing. So you're going to you can't crash the cryptos again to get literally everybody out. They did a bad enough thing by allowing it to rise to 20,000 and then crashing it down to 3,000 on Bitcoin. And a lot of the projects that weren't strong and didn't have the money failed. So we see a lot of cryptos that are just gone. You just don't hear about them anymore. The ones that didn't fail, the ones that followed through with their business plan and did the things they said they were going to do, are still kind of in the doldrums, at least compared to last time.
Right.
And last time, remember, there was free money floating everywhere. Everybody's like, it was a frenzy. People are swapping their Bitcoin for Populus and all the altcoins, even the crazy ones.
Right.
And that frenzy isn't even close to going on at this moment right now. Right now, where we are in the cryptos is, yes, we've had a big bump up. I think the bottom has long been in. Now we're climbing that wall of worry. As for any market that bottoms out, the blood was in the streets. It climbs a wall of worry. Everybody thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to get burned again. So if it goes up 10%, I'm going to get out. And then I go, damn, it's running away from me. I'm going to get back in. I'm going to get back out. And it's crazy. A lot of the traders are caught short. And it's one of those things where nobody has full faith and confidence that this thing's going to keep running upwards. And that's what you find at the bottom of a bull market. When the bull market starts, you got to climb that wall of worry. And then we hit the euphoria probably by the end of the year when we get the $100,000 Bitcoin and stuff like that. That was pretty much delayed for the last year and a half because of the manipulation.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned there, because I had been thinking about how even though the price is Bitcoin has gone up quite a bit. Doesn't feel like it was in the fall of, 2017, where everyone was talking about it and people were actually buying it. So I wonder
I think it's identical to the .com bubble, where everybody and their mothers, oh, yeah, I got pets.com. It's going to be the greatest company ever, and things like that. You get that hyper hysteria, you get the crash, and then, you know, if you look at what happened after the tech bubble bust, it grows into a real industry. The strong survived, and that's where we are now. The strong cryptocurrency companies and currencies right now are the ones that have survived and will thrive and be the Amazons of the future and Facebooks of the future and things like that.
And are you still, I guess, has anything substantially changed with the underlying fundamentals or business models of some of the alt tokens you've talked about, like Veritasium, Salt, Populous, which I'm stunned, especially to see Bitcoin back up to almost 9,000, and as low as those alts are, been reading and learning whether something's changed or if it's just the pricing seems a bit low.
Well, the reality is it got too high for startup companies, too high too soon. And now they are low. But the companies that are fulfilling their business plan, Veritasium, great example. Reggie Milton's running around signing deals behind the scenes. I hear there's lots of good news coming in June for Veritasium. Salt has a wonderful platform. They're giving out crypto loans, but the price of the token has just been destroyed.
Yeah.
Ultimately, obviously, there's a lot of manipulation, but also it won't take much for some of these cryptos to move 100, 200, 300% in kind of a blink of an eye type of thing. Yeah. I look at Veritasium, the only exchange that's really traded on where you can pull it off is Mercatox. And I mean, if you got 10 grand, you can move the price 20% of the entire, market cap, because market cap is just the amount of coins outstanding times the current price. You know, you don't need $100 million to rise the market cap of Veritasium, $100 million. All you have to do is get the price up there that certain percent, and then it changes the whole dynamic. And people chase price. That's, we've seen it in gold and silver. We've seen it in everything. Once the price starts moving, everybody's going to be trying to get in, and by then the manipulators will have their stock of the cryptos they like and things like that. But there's a lot of changes going on at the exchanges. Regulators are coming in June. And it's pretty much definite in its global regulation. So they're going to put out some standards supposedly for everybody. And you're going to see a lot of these smaller exchanges just fold up because the bigger exchanges need to get more coins because they don't have enough coins.
Right.
So it should be really interesting the summer. But definitely, cryptos are definitely the main solution to the banking crash of September 11th, 2019, if I want to make that prediction.
Yeah, it seems almost like I've thought of it as almost a startup where, you may have the greatest product that we're going to need to use in the future, but it takes a while for people, they didn't know what an iPhone was until we started using them. So there's some degree to which, there is value there. And if the assumptions are correct that it's really going to fill the need that you and I think that it will. So is looking at the adoption really a good way for folks when perhaps if they're new or still a little confused, but just seeing, on one hand, we have the Ponzi scheme dollar system. So, I think that's clear enough to see. And it's really, as you pointed out a lot, that we're seeing more applications and uses of the actual technology.
Yeah, I think this run, it's already started. We can already see it. It's the larger cryptocurrencies, the big name cryptocurrencies that are really leading the way, and the companies with the tokens and altcoins and all that are kind of being left behind. I think that'll continue for quite a while. But not that that the tokens or the alts won't run, because they will. With the rising of Bitcoin, everything rises. But the need for a currency when the banks start collapsing is going to be just off the charts. Right. So everybody's going to be scrambling over themselves to get their hands on some Litecoin, some Bitcoin, some Bitcoin Cash, Digibyte, all the good ones at least.
Right.
And then you're going to have regulators coming out saying, well, if we really do go use cryptocurrencies as a form of means of exchange and a currency, we can't tax it like a capital gains tax. And that is already in the works. And I don't know when they're going to announce that. I would assume it's going to be sometime this summer that they're going to say, oh, by the way, they're going to pick out some ICOs and say, these were definitely securities. But they're also going to say, hey, these true cryptocurrencies are going to be non-taxable because they are a currency. And you can't have a currency where you charge capital gains tax every time you buy a cup of coffee.
Yeah, it sure are a lot of signs. We saw, was Facebook or Starbucks a couple weeks ago that's working on their own coin. And
yeah, Facebook has their own coin coming out. Everybody's got their own. Samsung said they're working on something. I think Samsung is going to adopt the Theta chain. They're a major investor in Theta. And that Theta blockchain is just, it's fast as can be, and they have Theta fuel. I think the Samsung Theta marriage, if that's ever announced, when it's announced, I think it will be announced. I think Theta is going to go off the charts as far as like speculative buys that, it's an altcoin that all of a sudden goes crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be wild to see how it unfolds. Especially, I know you talk to Clif High frequently. I love watching those interviews.
I talked to him yesterday.
Oh yeah, is you recorded and are going to be posting?
Email. No.
Okay.
He's shying away from that stuff right now.
He's doing all right, hopefully.
Yeah, his wife Kathy's struggling with health issues, but other than that, he's doing well. He's got to testify in a court case, some grand jury thing about a crypto. So I don't know anything about it. He tweeted it out. I got a subpoena to testify.
I hope there's video of that. That'd be pretty fascinating to watch. Cliff lecturing the court on crypto. You actually, in the last one that you posted, asked him the question that I've wanted to figure out for quite a while. He didn't really answer it. But in terms of, the $600 silver, similar with the $100,000 Bitcoin numbers that his model was shooting out. What I've been wondering, he talked a lot about how manipulation has skewed things and also how he adjusts and tweaks the model to correct, as you go along, which makes sense. So I'm curious, and, you can give your opinion. Obviously, you can't speak for him. But I wonder if, based on everything he's learned, are those numbers still... Yes, we expect those to happen. They've been delayed because of selling a lot of paper silver, tinkering around in the crypto market, yet those are still valid numbers and it's only the timing has been delayed. What do you think he would feel on that?
Well, I asked him that exact question. And I many times asked him. He can't run his program doesn't work anymore because of the censorship of language now. So he's not getting the correct data, so he's not running his program. So, I mean, it wouldn't come from his programs. He's working on a way around that to try to get the Alta reports going out again. But he'd say, yeah, and it is a situation where the longer he has the information in his data, and this goes back to the 90s, I think he said, for $600 silver. The longer it is, the bigger the when it happens, the bigger the boom.
Yeah.
Obviously, $600 silver would be a big boom. Not just for silver investors, but for the short.
There are a few silver investors who would be happy with that, I think.
Well, it's funny because, coming from the gold and silver world and then jumping into cryptos, a crypto guy would say, yeah, that's no big deal. A jump from $15 to 600 is no big deal.
Yeah.
But in gold and silver, right. Oh my God, I've done it after all this hard work. But the last reports he ran, it's still in the data. It's been in the data for over a decade, and it is not just Clif's stuff that I analyze, because I see exactly how it could happen. If you follow Ted Butler's stuff, he nails them every time with their own data, and that's the best part about it. And then our good, wonderful friend Bart Chilton, who's departed now, which is just unbelievable. That just floored me when I heard that news. But he was the first to say, hey, it was absolutely manipulated, but I couldn't do anything for political reasons. You got to have enough votes on the CFTC, which is shocking, absolutely shocking that a member of the CFTC, a sane member of the CFTC, said it's rigged. And the ramifications of that should be shaking throughout the silver companies, but silver companies are ridiculous. I hate to say this, but the management of silver companies to allow something like this to happen to your product, to your employees, to your shareholders, that they can rig the market for so long and destroy the financial wherewithal of every single one of your constituents. These people should be hung out to dry along with the manipulators, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's a baffling one where I wonder how the traders the tech traders that JP Morgan's trading against, how they never notice that they're losing consistently. And similar with the mining companies where it's, I hear a lot of people say they're worried about the risk of getting their financing pulled from the banks, which I can understand, although silver
I don't understand that at all, because I mean, if you discover fraud, illegal fraud in your industry, and the people doing the fraud are lending you the money, and you're saying, hey, you're a criminal, you're helping support our company. I mean, it makes no sense to me. But I get it on a bigger picture that the U.S. has to support the system and have the system running. You can't have an unbacked fiat monetary system without controlling gold and silver prices. So there's just, but these feckless, that's my favorite word, feckless people, CEOs who run these silver mining companies should be ashamed of the way they've dealt with this over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the trade-off. You don't say anything, and now the price is below what it cost many of them to get it out of the ground, which obviously is not ideal. And I remember when after the April of 2011 and later on finding evidence, transcripts that, like you mentioned now, years later, Bart and others confirming what happened. So to me, it seemed, if the dollar was just got or U.S. got downgraded by S&P, it seemed like it could have been getting out of hand. And if silver was on the run then, and the only reason it went lower was because of manipulative trading, I thought 50 always seemed like a logical floor. And then it was years later, hearing a lot of your videos and the other silver guys out there, it's just, and that's what we captured in the book, where it's just, I interviewed one guy after another, and it just like, every time you think, wow, it couldn't be this extreme. So the multiple $100 number at some point does seem plausible when you actually just look at the fundamentals. And Bix, perhaps the last question for you today, in terms of silver, if you had to have your best guess of how it all ultimately unfolds, do you think it's, JP Morgan has the silver, they let it run? Does someone show up for a piece of metal and it's not there? What do you think is the most likely resolution?
Exactly what was about to happen on September 11th, 2008, in which we have a freezing up of the banking system. That would shut down JP Morgan, shut down the COMEX, the LBMA, all the markets. You wouldn't really know the price of silver. All the contracts would be voided. And I think that's coming. And it could very well be caused by the Deutsche Bank failure. And, Deutsche Bank's, stocks hovering, I think it dropped below $7 the other day from, 50, I think, at the beginning of the year. And that company, again, it's the derivative. It was always the trigger point of the derivatives that was set up in the 90s. Alan Greenspan took all regulation off derivatives, basically to give the banks enough rope to hang themselves, and that's exactly what they've done. So I think the most likely thing for silver to be set free, and the only way silver could be set free, is to destroy the COMEX and the LBMA, the two fraudulent exchanges that allow 400 or 500 to 1 trading in the price of in the amount of silver derivatives compared to the amount of silver that is above ground. I don't even measure it, how much is in the COMEX warehouses anymore, because it's, thousands to one. But just above ground versus how many are traded every year.
Do they even audit the COMEX warehouse, or do we know whether the metal's there? Is it like Fort Knox, which I heard the Treasury's lost 7 out of the 12 audits, and calling them an audit would be generous. Do we know if the metal's even there in COMEX?
That's one of the latest things that I've been thinking about. Jim Willey came out with a blockbuster that all the Fort Knox gold had been basically tungsten coated with gold, and he had all the paperwork on it and all that. And then I'm thinking, well, J.P. Morgan opens up their own warehouse. They're the custodian for SLV, the big silver. Obviously, they're commingling that silver. But is the silver even there? Ted Butler doesn't talk about, is that real silver, or is it molybdenum bars coated in silver? We don't know, and we have to trust J.P. Morgan because they're the trustee of SLV. They're the largest. If you look over the last 10 years since Bill Daley left Obama's right-hand side of Obama, that was Jamie Dimon's hitman. The warehouse for COMEX, J.P. Morgan, has gone through the roof as far as holdings. So it's all up to J.P. Morgan if any physical silver is in the market at all. And if I was J.P. Morgan, knowing the fraud they pulled at not West Point, but Fort Knox, why wouldn't they do the same thing with the SLV silver and the silver they have in all physical silver? So without trust, see, that's why cryptos are so good. They're trustless systems. You don't have to trust anybody.
Yep. And certainly why, physical metal over a lot of the paper derivatives that are out there, going somewhere, you're getting actual metal, wise thing to do. So Bix, thanks for joining me today. It was great having you on here, catching up again. I would also like to point out to folks that Bix has a new Patreon channel, which I just signed up for yesterday, and a great video on where a lot of the silver comes from. We always hear about the deficits, and in Bix's Patreon channel, which we'll put the link to below, you can dig in there and check that out. And Bix, and just any closing thoughts on how folks can reach you and keep posted?
Patreon, I'm still on YouTube for a while. They're basically defunding everybody. I can't talk about some of the stuff that I can talk about on Patreon. I can't talk about it on YouTube because they'll shadow ban me. Just criminal. It gets to me. But check out roadtoruta.com and keep up this fight. It's going to get exciting this summer.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you going through the effort. I know it's not always easy to speak the truth, and they throw a bunch of obstacles in the way, but a lot of folks, including myself, grateful for what you do, and we'll stay posted and talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
The land of our